What's up everyone and welcome back to my Echoes of Time channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. Marie Antoinette is still a very controversial figure, as evidenced by these 13 facts. The tragic French Queen Marie Antoinette is known for two things. She lost her head and she said the heartless words, "Let them eat cake." 7. Although she was the final queen in French history, this terrible queen was much more than that. Unexpected facts about Marie Antoinette actually show that she was a strong, intelligent, and morally upright woman. Marie Antoinette was born in Austria in 1755, a long way from the mirrored Versailles halls. She would be able to enjoy luxury and enormous fortune as Queen of France, but she would also experience loneliness, boredom, and fear. She did enjoy fashion, cards, and candy, but she also struggled to fit in at the French court and was frequently criticized for being an outsider. She was a mother, a sister, and a daughter in addition to being a queen. Marie Antoinette was a real woman who lived, loved, and died during one of the most turbulent periods in modern history, despite the myth of the doomed Queen of France and the accoutrements of the French monarchy. People all across the world have had particular ideas about her, particularly in recent movies, even before and after her execution during the French Revolution. While some depictions were extremely idealized, others were harsh. In the middle of those two extremes was the real Marie Antoinette. At the agonizingly young age of 14, she got married. The marriage between Marie Antoinette and Louis, the Dauphin and future King of France, was arranged by her Austrian mother and the French monarch. For a younger daughter of an Austrian emperor, it was a perfect marriage, and it was meant to bridge the gap between France and Austria. However, Louis was only 15 and Marie Antoinette was 14, making the participants very young. The two families celebrated their marriage despite their youth. The couple married via proxy in April 1770, thus they didn't really meet until after they were married. From Austria to her new residence in the French court, the new Dauphin of France then set off on a multi-week voyage. Austria and her mother would never be seen again. Up until the age of 21, she was a virgin. Despite Louis's kindness for Marie Antoinette, the royal couple's romance faltered from the beginning. They did not consummate their marriage right away. Marie Antoinette and her family had to persuade her for years. In letters from Austria, Maria Theresa gave advice to her daughter, and she even dispatched her son and heir Joseph II to France to encourage Louis to ultimately take his wife. The couple's marriage took 7 years to consummate in all. They accused her of incest at the Revolutionary Tribunal. Louis XVI and his wife were tried by a revolutionary tribunal as the French Revolution grew more extreme and rejected the idea of a constitutional monarchy. In January 1793, just a few days after being sentenced, Louis became the first person to be executed by guillotine. 6 months later, Marie Antoinette was put on trial. The sick queen had a tiring and degrading 32-hour trial, particularly after the prosecution accused her of having an affair with her young son. "Nature refuses to answer such a charge brought against a mother," the widowed former queen said, summoning all of her dignity to offer a statement that stunned the courtroom into silence. "In this case, I make an appeal to every mother in the courtroom." Even while her appeal helped her regain her honor, it did not spare her life. She received the same death sentence as her husband. "Let them eat cake" is probably not anything she ever said. One of Marie Antoinette's most famous quotes most likely never happened. According to legend, the queen apathetically said, "Let them eat cake," when she was informed that peasants throughout France were starving. The purpose of the story was to show how out of touch and contemptuous French royals were. Marie Antoinette never said this, according to the available evidence. A handsome Swedish officer was the love of her life. She did not find romantic fulfillment in her marriage, even though it was beneficial to both of them. She looked to a handsome young Swedish officer for that. When they were both 19 years old and von Fersen was in the middle of a grand tour of Europe, he first encountered Marie Antoinette during a masquerade at Versailles in 1774. However, it wasn't until the Swedish nobility came to France a few years later that their relationship really got going. To avoid becoming a scandal for the queen, von Fersen fled to America to fight alongside French forces after their close friendship sparked accusations. Their popularity had only increased by the time von Fersen visited Versailles again in 1783. It is generally acknowledged that Marie Antoinette and von Fersen had intense fondness for one another, which may have been romantic love, even though historians disagree about whether their relationship was platonic or had sexual interactions. Researchers revealed in October 2021 that they had examined hitherto undiscovered passages of letters from Marie Antoinette to von Fersen using X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy. They discovered that words and phrases like beloved, tend a friend, adore, and madly were hidden beneath redacted passages of the writing, which von Fersen had probably suppressed when he copied the letters. According to the researchers, who published their findings in the journal Science Advances, the choice of vocabulary attests a particular relationship between M.A. and Fersen, even if there is an influence of the revolutionary torment, which favors a certain emotional intensity. However, they did not prove a romantic relationship. Von Fersen stayed faithful to Marie Antoinette to the very end, regardless of whether they had a passionate romance. In 1791, he assisted Marie Antoinette's family in their vain attempt to flee France, even taking out a mortgage on his properties to finance the carriages that were supposed to transport the royal family to safety. Von Fersen returned to Sweden after surviving the revolution, although he never got married. Similar to Marie Antoinette, he met a tragic end in 1810 when he was killed by a Swedish mob. The tabloids of the 18th century constantly attacked her. Marie Antoinette was frequently criticized by both courtiers and non-courtiers. Given that she was an Austrian queen, she was certain to draw criticism because she was viewed as a foreigner by both French men and women. Marie Antoinette was frequently portrayed in caricatures and pamphlets as being avaricious, corrupt, and having strange tastes. She was accused of adultery, lesbianism with her close friends, and every other kind of behavior that would have shocked society in the 18th century. Her extravagant spending on fashion and real estate did not help matters either. She was even held directly responsible for the nation's dire financial situation. She was born in Austria to one of Europe's most influential women. Marie Antoinette was born an archduchess in Austria on November 2, 1755, but she passed away as a queen of France. The heir-apparent ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, Empress Maria Theresa, was her mother. As the strong leader who stood up for her inheritance against those who questioned whether a woman could govern the Habsburg Empire, Maria Theresa was a legend and one of the most influential women in Europe. Despite spending much of her life outside of the Austrian court, Marie Antoinette kept up a contact with her mother, writing to her roughly every 2 weeks. Marie Antoinette, like her mother, would find herself in a situation where her authority would be called into doubt. And just like her mother, she would show fortitude and determination when it counted most. She has some tomboy tendencies. In royal terms, Marie Antoinette had a lucky upbringing because she was known to be an energetic, boisterous youngster and was essentially free from the constraints of court life. In actuality, she was brilliant, vivacious, and somewhat of a tomboy. Marie Antoinette carried her preference for social interaction and activity over lonely study to France. She expressed her desire to accompany the present King Louis XV, who was also her new grandfather-in-law, on his renowned hunting expeditions after arriving at the French court. Hunting and horseback riding became her passions, and she even dazzled the court by riding a horse astride while wearing breeches. She first encountered Mozart when she was a child. Perhaps two of the most well-known Europeans of the 18th century were Marie Antoinette and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. It's ironic that the two people first crossed paths as kids, long before either had established themselves as significant historical characters. Mozart, who was a young prodigy, went to the Vienna court with his father and sister Nannerl, who was also a gifted musician. The young Mozart threw caution to the breeze when they were introduced to the imperial family, jumping into Empress Maria Theresa's lap and kissing her. Maria Theresa gave hand-me-down clothes from her own children to Wolfgang and Nannerl as a token of gratitude to the Mozarts. Nannerl received one of Marie Antoinette's ball gowns. She was a trendsetter in fashion. In order to stand out at the royal court, Marie Antoinette used fashion. She loved fashion in a level that was historically exclusive to royal mistresses, spending extravagantly on shoes, wigs, and apparel. She also introduced a more relaxed view of her modest palace on the grounds of Versailles, which went against royal decorum. When she persuaded her husband to vaccinate himself against smallpox, for example, she commissioned extravagant hairstyles to commemorate important anniversaries or social gatherings. At Versailles, she created a fantasy land. To get away from court life. The routine of royal life at Versailles frequently bored Marie Antoinette, so she fled in a frenzy of sociability. She was also alienated by the strict etiquette that regulated court life at the same time. She therefore took sanctuary in her own palace on the Versailles property. Known as Petit Trianon, it developed into a fantasy world where the opulent French queen might pretend to be a rural, pastoral nobody, apart from the strictures of royal life. There were scandals throughout her life in the Petit Trianon. The palace cost 2 million francs in total, and its seclusion made people wonder how and with whom the French queen was spending her private time. During the Revolution, she made an attempt to flee Paris. Marie Antoinette persuaded her husband that the royal family's best course of action during the French Revolution was to leave their captivity in the Palace of the Tuileries and seek refuge with royalist troops in the Montmedy region. The specifics of the 200-mile escape in June 1791 were overseen by von Fersen himself. The royal family would pretend to be a Russian noble family, with the king and queen acting as governess and servant, respectively. After being found in Varennes, the family was abruptly returned to Paris. She passed away with honor. Almost everyone had to agree that she died with dignity, despite the fact that the French frequently made fun of their foreign-born queen and revolutionaries made fun of her lavish lifestyle. Courage, she said to her priest as she readied herself for execution in prison. The time when my troubles will cease is not the time when I will lose courage. Her prematurely white hair, cut short for the guillotine, would have been visible to onlookers as she rode in an open cart through the streets of Paris to the guillotine. Despite their mocking remarks, she maintained her elegant, stoic poise. According to one account, she ultimately apologized to the executioner with her remarks. "I beg your pardon, monsieur," she allegedly said to him after treading on his foot as she approached the guillotine. On October 16, 1793, early in the afternoon, she was put to death.